Thank you very much. No, no, thank you very much, Mr. Haber. They just came. Okay. Well, on the Gemara on Lami Gimel Amar Aleph, 33a. On the right side. Yofshu, you have a 33A1. A1. You have it? So it's, yeah, we're gonna say Noktam Rosho. Second. You have Noktam Rosho? 33A. 1. Noktam Rosho. Right? The top of the Hadass got cut off. That's right. You have the two dots. Yeah. So let me just get. Look like Jaime was trying to get on. Let me just tell him. Okay. Noktam Rosho. The top of the Hadass got cut. Right. So the Mishnah stated. Morning, Henry. How are you? I saw you were trying to get on.
Okay, I'll dial in. Thank you.
No, you're trying, right? That was you, right?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, thank you so
No
much.
problem. Thank you. Bye. So it says if the top of the Hadass was cut, Noktam Rosho. So the Mishnah stated that will invalidate the Hadass, correct? At the top of the Hadass, the top part is a very crucial part of the Hadass, and if the top gets cut off, we said that that's no difference whether it was cut off intentionally or accidentally. If the piece of the stem got cut off, morning Jaime.
Morning.
The top, here's the wood, here's the stem itself. The top, not talking about the leaf getting cut off. I'm talking about the top of the hadash. The wood itself gets cut. The Mishnah stated that it's invalid, and the Mishnah did not tell us any amount of how much of the top got cut off, which would seem to indicate any amount of the top that gets snipped off, the wood itself, that would. This is the hadash. As you see, it's missing a lot of leaves. The three myrtle. We're talking now about the myrtle branch. So the myrtle branch, if the top of the branch gets cut off, that will invalidate the hadash. Will be pasul. So comes the Gemara and says, "Noktam rosho, tani ula b'chanina, noktam rosho v'olta b'tamara." What happened if the top gets cut off, but a berry grew in the top, which covered the blemish, so to speak? Meaning, when you have a cut on top of the, it grew right. It grew over a period of time, correct? And now it's like cover up. It covered up the, sometimes you got a thing on the wall with a stain, and you put something on top of it to cover it up. So now this covers up the so to speak, the inadequacy or the lack of beauty of the hadass, because it has now something that's covering the hole, so to speak, or covering that cut. So comes Ula Bachinana, and he says kosher. He says a chidush. He says that it's kosher, and you could use it for hadass. So you have a situation that hadass at one time was not kosher because of the cut on top, and then you fixed it up like a person does the sin. So they're a bit now they read the tshuva. It was improved, right? It was corrected, so to speak. It's repaired. That's called repaired. It was self-repaired. That the berry grew by itself, natural growth, and that will make it kosher. So that's what the Gemara says. Comes the Gemara, and Rabbi Yirmiyah has the following question. You didn't give me much detail. Ula B'chainina did not tell us when did this the berry grew to cover up the invalidation. Did it grow before Yom Tov? Or even if when Yom Tov entered, the berry wasn't there yet, you didn't see it, it wasn't covering properly. Let's say it was there a certain amount, but it didn't make the move enough to cover that cut on top of the stem. But on Yom Tov itself, on the day of Yom Tov, overnight, the berry moved, the berry came out, and it covered the So the Gemara, only tells us about the berry, so we don't know that. It doesn't seem if I can't put something on it and make it, Scotch tape. It doesn't seem that would work, because he should have told us that, which would make it much easier for everybody. Just put something on top of it. But the question the Gemara wants to know is, what's the law if this hadass, when Yom Tov entered, the hadass was rejected, was not valid for Yom Tov? And then subsequently, now the berry comes on. Would we say that would be fine? Now you could ask the question, why shouldn't it be fine? You told me that if you had it was cut on top, and then you went ahead and the berry grew, you told me it's good. So what should be the difference between when the berry grew? So the Gemara says there's something called by a korban, by an offering. If let's say you slaughtered an animal to bring it on the mizbeach, to bring it on the altar, and then now what happened was, after you slaughtered it, the altar, there was some issue with the altar. Let's say the altar was damaged, and if the altar is damaged, you can't bring the offering on the altar. And then they subsequently fixed the altar. They called in the repairman. He fixed the altar. Right. So the question, so we say over there by Karban that once it was rejected, once the animal was not able to be brought because of some whatever reason, you can't bring that animal. That animal, once it was rejected because you can't bring this animal because whatever the reason was, the altar was damaged or whatever the case was. Once rejected, this is not fit to be brought. We say it's not able to be brought subsequently, even after the damage. Now we have to, that's the law by an offering. So the Gemara wants to know, does that law equally apply by mitzvahs, by mitzvah? That means here is a mitzvah. The hadas is used as mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to take a lulav and talk hadas marabot. It was rejected. It was disqualified. It wasn't fit for the mitzvah when Yom Tov came because there was no berry that covered up the cut spot. Subsequently, the berry came on Yom Tov. Do we compare it to a karban, to an offering that we would say that once it's rejected from it can't use that item that was rejected? Or do we say that there's a difference between a mitzvah and a korban, and maybe a korban we say once it was rejected from being brought, it can't be brought, but we don't compare a mitzvah to the same thing as a korban. So that is the question of the Gemara. Mahu. Noktam Rosho Me'erev Yom Tov Otav Atmar B'Yom Tov Mahu. What is the law? Yesh Dichui Eitz Mitzvot. Good morning, Ralph. Is there this law of Dichui by mitzvot that once it's pushed off, once it was invalidated for the mitzvah, then it is pushed off forever? Or do we say that we don't say this concept of Dichui, of once it's pushed off, it's pushed off? Now, just to understand the point, morning, Ralph, just to bring Ralph up to date, we have a hadas that before when Yom Tov, and see if the hadas had a cut before Yom Tov on top, the top was snipped off of the hadas, and the berry grew before Yom Tov. So by the time the mitzvah came, it was fine. It was never pushed away from the mitzvah. Because the time of the mitzvah only kicks in on the holiday. So that's not the Gemara. That the Gemara has no question about. If the hadas got snipped on top before and a berry came and covered the spot, now it covered up the negativity of the hadas, the lack of beauty, because the berry covered the cut spot. It's fine. But the question the Gemara wants to know is that if it was cut before Yom Tov, the hadas, and the berry grew on Yom Tov, so when Yom Tov came, it was rejected. It was not allowed to be used on Yom Tov because it did not have the berry yet. The berry did not grow yet to cover the spot. I think there's a makeup called cover up, right? It covers up, right? They call it covers up. I presume it covers up pimples. It covers up. So the berry covers up the lack of beauty. That's what the berry did. But the berry only grew on the holiday. So when the holiday came in, this hadas, let's say, was rejected. So now once it's rejected, do we say it's rejected completely? Doesn't come back? Well, you can't use this thing that was rejected. It was rejected. Now you can't use it. Or do we say that concept of once rejected is you can't use it, use it again, even it's only by the karban, by an offering. We have such a stringency, such a law, that if something was fit for was rejected from being used as an offering, then even if the thing that caused the rejection was fixed, once rejected, it's rejected. That is the question in the Gemara. Now we're turning the page. So the Gemara said, Tifshot la mehoditnan. Now you have a question on 33.8.2. You have a question by mitzvot. If once it's rejected, it's totally rejected. So why don't you answer the question from a different law? We have a different law. We'll bring a different case. And as Mr. Haber likes to say, case, law, and reason. So we'll look at this case and we'll see if we could compare, if it's comparable, right? We have a precedent. And so what's the Gemara say? We learned in the Mishnah Chul, there's a special mitzvah to cover up the blood of a bird that you slaughter or a chaya, a kosher wild animal, like a deer or those type of animals that are wild, you have a special mitzvah to cover up its blood. That's called kisui hadam, cover up the blood. It's interesting, the Gemara says, let's say if I slaughter a bird and you go ahead and you jump in, and you cover the blood before I cover it, it's my mitzvah, it's my animal. If you go ahead and you cover the blood before me, you have to pay me 10 gold coins because you took away my mitzvah. So we give you a fine for taking away somebody's mitzvah. It's a serious offense to take away a mitzvah. When you have a mitzvah to do, it's a great opportunity. So if kisohu, if you covered up the blood, you did a good job. You followed the law. You slaughtered a bird or a chaya. You covered the blood, but v'nizgala. And after you covered the blood became revealed. The wind came and blew off the dirt. Let's say it was a big wind like today, and it blew off the dirt, and the blood is no longer covered. So what do we? You cover it with dirt, with afar. So what do we say? Patur melachaso. You are exempt from reveal. Good morning, Aaron. You're exempt from recovering the blood. Once you finish the mitzvah one time, you do not have to cover it again. You don't have to worry that it has to be covered forever. See, like there's a mitzvah of tochacha, right? There's a mitzvah to give someone a rebuke. Someone does a sin, right? You have a mitzvah to say something to him. And he does the same sin again, you have a mitzvah to tell him again. It's not a one-time deal by rebuke. It says, it says the language of the Torah says, rebuke, you shall rebuke, which we say even 100 times. Every time the person does a sin, you're supposed to say something to him. You don't just say, okay, I told him once, and he does he ate not kosher today. I told him don't, you have to eat kosher. Then tomorrow again he wants to eat not kosher. I gotta say something tomorrow to him again. Every time he wants to do the sin, I have to go ahead and say something, correct? But when it comes to here, this mitzvah of this is not a question of rebuke, this mitzvah of covering the blood, once you cover the blood, that's it. Whatever happens to the blood afterwards, even if the blood, and we're talking about covering the blood of slaughtered a bird, you have to cover the blood. But even if the blood subsequently becomes revealed, you uncovered, you do not have to cover it again. It can stay uncovered, exactly. There's no mitzvah. The mitzvah is finished. You already did your mitzvah. There's no mitzvah to, you want to cover it. You want to cover it again, you can cover it again. It's like a menorah. You lit the menorah properly, technically. The menorah, you did the mitzvah. The light went out. The mitzvah was done. You lit it. You lit it with the amount of time that it should light properly, and then it went out. That's not your your mitzvah was done. It's nice to relight it again, but you don't have to relight it again. But it's nice to do it. Suppose the blood has to, for a second, just a second. You cover the blood. As long as you cover the blood, it's good. Okay. Maybe there's more reason to relight the menorah than to recover this blood. But the point is, you understand, the mitzvah was completed. The mitzvah was completed. The Gemara says, but kiso haruach, what about if you didn't cover the blood? The blood got covered by a wind. You slaughtered the bird, and you had the dirt ready. You wanted to put on the dirt, but the wind blew the dirt onto the blood. And whatever the laws of covering the blood, it covered enough of the blood that would be that fulfilled the mitzvah, that the blood is covered. Now you didn't do the mitzvah. The mitzvah was performed for you by the wind. You don't get credit for the mitzvah because you didn't cover the blood. But at the end of the day, the blood is what? It's covered. So we say, kisoa ruach, if the wind covered the blood, chayav l'chasot. The Gemara will explain that means that if after the wind covered the blood, subsequently another wind came and threw off the blood, threw off the dirt, that the cover went away, right? Then we say you are obligated to go ahead and to recover it. Let's see the language inside, because it says kiso haruach. If the wind covered it, you are obligated to cover it. And the Amar Rabba Chana Yochanan, what does it mean you're obligated to cover it? Lo shanu, that's only talking El Shechazan is Gala, that it became uncovered. The wind came ahead and covered it. Then it became uncovered. Then you are obligated to what? To cover it. Okay? And you get a mitzvah. Exactly. Because if the wind originally covered it, so technically the mitzvah was you never did the mitzvah. The wind covered it. The mitzvah wasn't, if the blood is covered, but the mitzvah of you covering the blood was not performed. Then the wind that moved away the cover, so now you go ahead and you do the mitzvah by you covering it, because now the mitzvah of covering the blood was done, right? But of a lo chazav is gala, but if the wind covered the blood and it remained covered by the wind, even though the covering was done by a wind, there is no obligation for you to cover the blood. The blood is covered. The fact that it was covered by the wind does not at the end of the day, the blood is covered. So there's no mitzvah for you to go ahead and cover the blood. So when do you have a mitzvah to cover the blood? Only in the case, again, usually you slaughter a bird, you have a mitzvah to cover the blood. If the wind covers, if you cover the blood and then the blood became uncovered, you don't have to do anything. If the wind covers the blood and then subsequently becomes uncovered, then you have an obligation to cover the blood. Okay, so the Gemara says, Vavinoba, and we asked on this in the Gemara in Chulin, we asked, there's a whole parak, by the way, in Chulin, it's called Kisui Hadam, covering of the blood. So the whole parak in Chulin, which the Heba loved Maseches Chulin, remember that we learned Chulin early on, and the Gemara, and the whole parak called covering of the blood. All the laws of how you cover, the laws pertaining to covering the blood. So the Gemara says, Vavinaban, the Gemara asks, Kichozav in his gala, even when the wind covered the blood, and then subsequently the wind uncovered the blood, Amai chayav l'chaso? Why are you subsequently obligated to cover the blood? Why don't we say hoyo v'itchi itchi? Why don't we say, since this blood was pushed away from the mitzvah of covering the blood, because as long as the blood is covered, you said there's no mitzvah for me. As long as the wind covers the blood, there's no mitzvah for me to cover the blood. So we're saying that, so it's pushed, it was disqualified from mitzvah. It did not have the mitzvah. So it's not, the mitzvah was pushed away, and yet we say it comes back. We don't say once the mitzvah was pushed away, it's away. We say the mitzvah comes back. It's pushed away as long as it's covered with the blood. But once it's uncovered, the mitzvah comes back. But Amar Rav Papa, and Rav Papa said, Zota Meret, we see from here, Ein dichu yitzol mitzvot. When it comes from mitzvot, it's different than a korban. That if the thing that caused the mitzvah to be not to be able to be pushed away is removed, and the mitzvah comes back, so you don't say once it's rejected, it's off. We say it comes back. In contrast to a korban that we say by offering, once it was rejected, we say it's rejected, it's over. So the Gemara says, once Rabbi Yirmi has the question, Rabbi Yirmi opened up with a question with the Hadass. Hadass was cut before Yom Tov, right? The top of the Hadass was cut before Yom Tov. That makes it invalid. And when Yom Tov entered, it was still the top of the Hadass was cut. It's rejected. On Yom Tov, this thing was rejected. Then the berry grew on the top of the Hadass. It's Rashi says that this type of berry, this grows even though it even though it was, some things like some things like blood or certain things like, so that Rashi says this berry grows even though it was already separated from the ground. So we should have an answer to the question that if the berry grew on Yom Tov, that now it grew enough on Yom Tov. I presume there was a certain amount of berry that it grew before Yom Tov, but it wasn't enough to cover that spot, that top spot where it was cut. And then on Yom Tov, it went over the finish line, that now it covers the top of the Hadas. So why don't we see from Rav Papa, from the story of Kisei Hadam, of the covering of the blood, that we don't say once the mitzvah was rejected, it's off. We say it comes back. So too, we should say the Hadas, it was true. When Yom Tov entered, the Hadas was rejected from being the mitzvah because because the top was cut. It did not have the berry covering it. But subsequently, once the berry covers it, it should be good. Just like by the mitzvah of Kisei Adam, by the covering of the blood, that we say that even though it was rejected from the mitzvah during the time period that the blood was covered through the wind, but once the wind removed the blood, moved the cover, the blood becomes exposed. The mitzvah comes back. That's what the Gemara wants to prove from Rav Papa. Jaime, is it clear? I mean, it's a lot going on over here. Okay. So the Gemara says, the Rav Papa gufa mibayale. So the Gemara says, Rav Yirmiyah had a question in what Rav Papa deduced something. Rav Papa saw from the Mishnah by the covering of the blood, he saw this concept that we don't say once a mitzvah is once something is pushed away, it's pushed away. We don't say that. We don't say, and therefore that's why you have to cover the blood of the bird after the wind came and removed the cover that came through the wind. You have to go cover it. But the question is, Rav Yirmiyah wanted to understand what is the reason why the Tana of the Mishnah. The Tana of the Mishnah says that even though it was rejected from the mitzvah because it was covered by the wind, and at that point it was rejected from the mitzvah, the Tana required you to cover it. Is it because the Tana holds that you don't push it, even though it's pushed away, it always comes back. Whether it's going to be a stringency as a result of that, or a leniency as a result of that. Because a stringency would be you have to recover the blood when the wind removes the cover. You have to recover it. That's a stringency. A leniency would be is to say that the hadas that was not kosher when Yom Tov came, and now because it didn't have the berry on top, and now the berry comes, if you're going to say that it's not pushed away and it is kosher, that will be a leniency to say that you could use this hadas that was once pushed away and now it comes back. So does the Tana of the Mishnah hold all the way with this law that once rejected is not rejected, whether a leniency comes out of that or a stringency comes out of it? That's what the Tana holds. Or does the Tana hold, or does the Tana himself has a safek, has a doubt? The Tana is not sure what the hell he's saying. The Tana himself has a doubt whether you should, whether you go ahead and push away once something's rejected, it's rejected or not. And therefore, the only reason why, by the case of the covering of the blood, he says you have to recover it when the wind covered it to begin with and the wind removed it, is because he wanted to be strict. He wanted to be strict, so he says you got to recover it. But he will not allow a leniency he will not allow you to go ahead and use a hadas that was rejected and then came back because the berry grew. He might be, you have to be strict. To be strict would be you cannot use it. So that's what the Gemara is saying. That's Rav Yirmiyah. You see, when somebody says something, when somebody says a certain law, yeah, the question, and in this particular case, the case of the recovering of the blood, Rav Yirmiyah was not sure, did he say this law out of that he knew that there was no question about the law, and that's why he said what he said, or there was a question of the law and he was just being strict about it. So sometimes, there's a question and you say, you know what, we got to be strict because it's not clear. You got to be strict. But then if that's the case, then it has the application of a law is only to be strict. You're not clear about it, but you have to be strict. But if you hold clearly that it's not a question of being strict or not being strict, it's all about, it doesn't make a difference whether it was rejected or not rejected. It could come back. So it could come back, the mitzvah could come back, whether it's going to be a leniency or whether it will be a what? A stringency. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says there are papa gufum ibayale. Mifshat pashit leila tana. Was it simple to the Tana? Was it obvious to the Tana that there ain't dichui etz mitzvot? That there's no such thing as pushing away by mitzvot. And we don't say once it's pushed off, it loses it. We say rather it can be pushed off, but it comes back, and the mitzvah comes back. Loshna l'kula v'loshna l'chumra. There wouldn't be, if we hold it, once it pushed off, it does not remains pushed off. It doesn't make a difference whether leniency will come out as a result of it or a stringency come out. Or maybe he has a question. Maybe the Tana of the Mishnah has a question, whether we say once it's pushed off by a mitzvah, does it continuously be pushed off? And the chumra minan and the kula lo minan. And we will only go l'chumra. We will only go to be strict. We will go ahead and say it's not pushed off, and you have to recover the blood. But l'kula, but to say a leniency lo amina, we will not say, and therefore the Gemara says teku. The Gemara says that this question becomes unanswered. At this point, it's unanswered, but the Gemara is going to answer. We'll see on the next page of the Gemara, we're going to see a partial answer to this question. Okay, the Gemara continues discussing this issue. Lema ketanai. Let us say that this question of whether by a mitzvah, once a mitzvah, if something's rejected from a mitzvah, whether it could come back and be used as a mitzvah once rejected, lema ketanai. To me, by the way, we have to look more into the source of the matter, but maybe it's like an idea of being what would be the logic behind it? Maybe it's not respectful in a certain sense. We can understand by the hadass why something that was rejected. Maybe it's not respectful that the thing that was rejected should now be used for the mitzvah. That could be a logic for the hadass, but we have to see more. What will be what's behind this law of we find by a korban that's rejected from the korban, right? We said that if you slaughter the animal and there's something wrong with the mizbeach, the altar, if you can't bring the animal on the altar, it's rejected. We say that even if subsequently the altar is fixed, it's still rejected. So we have to see more about the logic behind it. But the Gemara says, Lema ketanai. Let's say it's an argument of Tanaim, of early rabbis. Ava v'liktan. We have a braita. You went ahead and you cut the berries off on Yom Tov. We said you were not supposed to. It says on Yom Tov you're not supposed to remove. Morning, Isaac. You're not supposed to remove the berries on the hadassim. We said if the hadass has more berries than leaves, so we said that it's not kosher. You can't use the hadass, right? On Yom Tov, if it has more berries, you're supposed to cut the berries off from before Yom Tov. Cut the berries off before Yom Tov, and now you got a good hadass. Well, what happened? The guy did not cut the berries off from before Yom Tov, and he went ahead and he did a violation. He cut the berries off on Yom Tov. Avav v'liktan. And now the question is, can he use this hadass that was cut, that the berries were cut off on Yom Tov? So we have a machloket, pasul. Divi Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok. Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok says it is pasul. You cannot use this hadass on Yom Tov, and we'll see how the Gemara is going to understand. Now remember, when Yom Tov entered, this hadass was rejected. This hadas was no good. You go to the rabbi, you can't use it. There's too many berries on this hadas. So it's rejected. Now you made it, now it's fit because it doesn't have too many berries anymore. But once rejected, it sounds like it says once rejected, it remains rejected. Morning. And therefore it's invalid. The Chachamim say, no, you could use this hadas. Even though he did something wrong, you should not have cut the berries off. You know, it's like it's a rabbinic issue. The rabbis are here to protect, and it looks like you're fixing something. You know, you take something that's not fit because it has the berries on it, it's not fit for the mitzvah, and now it's like you fixed it. You know, by going ahead and making it fit by cutting the berries off. But the Chachamim say, nevertheless, even though a sin was performed, you should not have cut off the berries, but you could still use this hadas for the mitzvah. So the Gemara says, Savruha, the rabbis in the Beit Midrash, the Chachamim in the Beit Midrash, who want to say that the argument of these two early rabbis is dependent on this dispute. Once rejected, is it continuously rejected? The Kulei Amar Lulav Ein Sarach Eged. You remember we have a whole discussion. Do you have to tie the hadasim and the aravot to the lulav? We tie the hadasim and the aravot to the lulav, but we found we do it as a result of to beautify the lulav. It's beautiful when they're tied together, but technically we hold the halacha. It does not require to be tied together. Meaning, it's not it's not the meat and potatoes of the mitzvah. It's not an integral part of the mitzvah. They have to tie. You know, you need 3 hadasim. That's an integral part of the mitzvah. You need 2 aravot. You need to have a lulav and etrog. But you need to have the hadasim and aravot tied to the lulav to fulfill the mitzvah. Why not? So we found there's a machloket in the Gemara. We hold you don't technically need it to fulfill the mitzvah. You fill the mitzvah without it being tied, but you lose out of a separate thing called beautifying a mitzvah. It's a separate, like every mitzvah you have to beautify. You lost out the beautification of the mitzvah. So the Gemara is saying that the rabbis, and that's the halacha. So the rabbis are thinking at this point, the rabbis are thinking that these rabbis, even though they're arguing, they're not arguing about that issue. They're arguing about a different issue. They agree about the issue that you don't need to tie that das and the rubber to the lulav, but they're arguing on something else. Everybody holds lulav ain't sarach eged. You don't have to tie the hadas and rubber to the lulav. And that even im tim saloma, and even if you say starich eged, that the rabbis hold, these rabbis hold, you have to tie it together. But nevertheless, lo yafinan lulav misukah. There's a special halacha by sukkah that when you make the sukkah, you have to make it in a kosher fashion. It can't be that the schach is already made and it's not kosher, and then you do something to the inside, and now automatically it's going to be kosher. What's the example? Let's say you have a pile of hay, pile of straw. Straw, let's say, is kosher. It's kosher for schach. It grew from the ground. It's not makabel tumah. And then you cut out. Let's say you have 10 feet of hay, and you cut out 9 feet, and you left the top foot, and you cut out from the inside, and now you left the outside. You left the box. You left the sukkah. But you didn't. But the sukkah was not made when you didn't put up the roof now. You didn't put up the schach now. The schach, when the schach was put up, was made a pile of hay. A pile of hay is not kosher. And then you went in, you did something. Now it became by itself a sukkah. It came a schach by itself. That's no good. It says chag sukkot tasel. You have to make it in a kosher fashion. You can't just it happens on its own because you cut away the inside and now you have schach. It doesn't work that way. That will not be kosher. We'll see more tomorrow how we're going to compare other items. Do we compare other items of the lulav etrog to the sukkah or not? Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you for being here. All the best, everybody. Take care. If I what? If you had you alter, what'd you do? You took the berries off for Yontav, you're great. The only issue here is we didn't do the job. We didn't take it off before Yom Tov. You left the berries on, and now what? And now you can't, it's invalid. I can't use it. And went ahead and what did he do? He cut it off on Yom Tov. You have about 20 pounds to save, not the stuff. And I know you do it. You never questioned that.
Not doing coffee? Virgin Star. I think it's nice. Yeah, just saw that. Well, man, Virgin Star and stand for showing. Okay, Jesus.
هاي اشتراها السعادة حتى مي اللي سهل بإسرائيل مدينة به مش عبده.
Beautiful.
So the Persian Tsar that was signed by Jews.
Right.
مدينة به مش عبده. You could take Mishubatim using that star.
Good. Oh,
But they don't know how to read it.
yeah, I love. Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe, all right. It goes another way, but that sounds right. Right. I love we try.
We use it.
They're not, I was just saying that they wouldn't be.
Oh, they have only in the Mikre. They don't know how to read it.
Do that.
Did they edit? No, they do. They have in the cloud chain or your folder. He's there yet. But I thought you need how that people could determine where it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess can interpret. Rashi puts it.
Lekker. Tourism. With the Apisina. With the Apisan.
So did we see Happy Sun before?
Once. Yes.
No, recent, right?
Not like last week, but.
That was something like the handwriting. Hockey's high loft, it's the bottom of the last page. Don't remember that, but